HAARP stands for High Frequency Active Auroral Research Project and is described as a research instrument for studying the ionosphere, an ionospheric heater, or ionospheric radiation instrument, IRI, of which many exist, but HAARP is special. The ability to focus energy and the unprecedented amount in gigawatts, billions of watts, make it literally millions of times more effective at heating the region about 150 miles above the Earth's surface. The atmosphere has most of its density below 30 miles altitude. The ionosphere is the very thin layer above that absorbs dangerous ultraviolet radiation and makes life possible on Earth. There is very little mixing normally between the two layers, but disturbances in the ionosphere translate to changes in weather, such as normally occurring sunspots and the solar wind. The main idea behind HAARP is the ability to direct electrons along the naturally occurring magnetic field lines of the Earth and accelerate them to near the speed of light, to form a protective shell of highly excited particles that not only block communications worldwide, but destroy missiles in their trajectory as they descend from space. The effects can be localized by punching a hole through the ionosphere to superheat an area 30 kilometers in diameter into a plasma shield. Any missile or aircraft would be destroyed that tried to fly through the plasma, which is the fourth state of matter. A hole in the ionosphere above an enemy country could kill by allowing the solar radiation to strike the surface of the Earth unhindered. Weather modification can also be used as an instrument of warfare by manipulating the electrojet and the jet streams which dictate climate. The publicly stated aim is C3, or Communications, Command and Control. The margin of victory in war is to block or intercept enemy communications and to secure your own. The signals in the ELF range can be generated by HAARP and heard anywhere in the world, and are used for Earth-penetrating tomography, basically finding enemy submarines or underground bases. Volcanoes and earthquakes cause electromagnetic disturbances, and it is theorized that EM disturbances might themselves trigger earthquakes and volcanoes. Dr. Richard Williams says the high-energy experiments will generate the equivalent of the output of 10 to 100 large power generating stations, and that tests of these kinds could cause irreversible damage, unquote. HAARP is the world's largest electromagnetic broadcasting station and may represent an escalation in the electromagnetic wars. The project is a creation of the U.S. Air Force and Naval Research. Publicly, it is an ionospheric research instrument, but it can be used to control weather and do electromagnetic sweeps that can be used for mind control of large populations. HAARP, located 30 miles from Fairbanks, Alaska, is the real focus of anti-missile defense that SDI, the Strategic Defense Initiative, purported to be, and much more. The public patent was titled A Method and Apparatus for Altering a Region of the Earth's Atmosphere, Ionosphere, and Magnetosphere. Dr. Bernard Eastland, a physicist who holds a patent for the fusion torch, also holds about a dozen other related patents that were eventually purchased by E-Systems and Raytheon. Patent number 4686605 claims the following uses: cause total disruption of all forms of communications over a very large portion of the Earth, missile or aircraft destruction, deflection or confusion, weather modification by altering solar absorption, also altering composition of the atmosphere. This patent was classified by the Navy under National Security Order in 1987, but other patents exist for purposes of power beaming systems, artificial ionospheric mirror composed of a plasma layer, creation of artificial ionizing clouds above the Earth, defense system for discriminating between objects in space, nuclear-sized explosions without radiation, Dr. Yarrow states, Earth's axial spin means that a burst lasting more than a few minutes will slice through the ionosphere like a microwave knife, producing not a hole, but a long tear and incision, unquote. According to Dr. Elizabeth Rascher, the ionosphere is prone to catalytic reactions, so if a small part is changed, a major change in the ionosphere can happen. HAARP documents admit that 1,000-fold greater amounts of energy can be released in the ionosphere than are injected. Stanford University experiments beaming radio waves, very low frequency waves, into the magnetosphere detected the signals halfway around the world. Some were amplified 1,000 times. HAARP documents describe intentionally trying to get a runaway effect in the ionosphere. The instabilities commonly studied are approaching their maximum radio frequency energy dissipative capacity, beyond which the plasma processes will run away until the next limiting factor is reached, unquote. The first atomic weapons testing was done without knowing if the chain reaction would stop or keep going. Dr. Robert Oppenheimer admitted years later that, quote, the government knew that the scientists didn't know, unquote. The decision to pulse several gigawatts of energy into the ionosphere could cross a threshold. Walter Richmond wrote an account of such an event in a book entitled The Lost Millennium. The event began with a solar tap, a planetary short circuit. Quote, the surge of power became an avalanche. At the pole in the vertical plane of the Earth's magnetic field where the winds of magnetism would not rise to blow it out, 1 trillion watt-seconds of energy unleashed their fury on the polar cap in the first flash. Even as it discharged, the ionosphere was recharged from the solar furnace. The first flash became a mighty roar that poured an increased and now steady stream of energy through the now stabilized short circuit. Kilocubit after kilocubit of frozen wasteland boiled. Watt after ever-increasing watt, an avalanche of ever-increasing energy lit the polar cap with a glare that had never been seen before on Earth. Earth's an electrical motor. When the motor began to run wild, it would increase its rotational speed. Eventually the Earth would explode from increased centrifugal stress. Dr. Teller tried to sell Alaska on Project Plowshare, the use of 6 thermonuclear weapons to excavate a harbor at Cape Thompson, Alaska. In 1987, Dr. Edward Teller returned to Alaska to propose the installation of a laser-like weapon system on the north slope of Alaska. The weapon system Dr. Teller was trying to sell was classified and would not openly be discussed, but the presentations indicated this Star Wars weapon was in fact HAARP. In 1995, Congress killed funding for Star Wars, but HAARP continues as the ultimate SDI radio frequency radiation weapon. The HAARP project manager describes the experiment of Earth-penetrating capability using, quote, frequencies of 10 to 20 Hertz pulses per second, or maybe 1 Hertz, 1 cycle per second type waves, unquote. This range of frequencies are the same dominant frequencies within which the human brain normally operates. Objections to non-disclosure of the biological effects of ELF on living things were ignored. The military, particularly the Navy and Air Force, have extensive research on the negative effects of ELF. These effects have been well documented, but the government easily deflects public concern by playing down the effects and minimizing the risks. This is the same method used for other military systems, including nuclear weapons tests, LSD experiments, and radiation experiments, all carried out on unknowing subjects under the guise of national security.